Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Stony Streams. We have quite a few people here today. Some recurring members. Me, I'm Nora. There's Lee, KJ, EC, Shelby, Tavia, and Rosie are all people who have been on the podcast before. But we have somebody new. So why don't you introduce yourself, Jo? Just like give us your name, pronouns, Twitter handle, and how you got into Paper Girls.
Hi, I'm Jo. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm at lesbian NPC on Twitter. I got into Paper Girls through Marvel's Runaways. I really liked the show and the comics, and Brian K. Vaughan worked on and created the Runaways. And I wanted to read more of his stuff, so I looked up a list of things that he's worked on, and Paper Girls was on there. So, and it looked like the most interesting thing that I would like to read. So I read it, and it was over from there.
All right,
Yeah,
so we got
that's it.
another original comics Paper Girls fan, which is always exciting. I think with that we can just get into it. I know Rosie had some ideas to start with.
Yeah, so Mac, I think, really lives in a household where masculine traits are emphasized and valued, and you have to be tough and you have to be strong, and it kind of they have to be a bit dismissive of things. And so I think like she has a lot of naturally masculine traits, like naturally stereotypically masculine traits, but she also has this other side of softer ones that would be more stereotypically feminine, and so she kind of learns to stifle those and emphasize the ones that will make her have a good standing in that household. So I think it's a lot about kind of being a force of her own in that household and being like maintaining her status there, I think. And so when we kind of see these other traits that she has, like she loves animals and she loves reading, and she has a very gentle side that we see with how she takes Erin under her wing and wants to be a vet and all of that. But I think she kind of stifles those down so that they're a surprise when they come out throughout the story. And I feel like Mac is caught in this battle of hardness versus softness, and cruelty versus kindness, and strength versus vulnerability. And so I think her struggle between those two dichotomies re-emphasizes both of them in a way. Like she comes across as very hard and a bit cold to the other girls, but then she also breaks down on the motorcycle and is so overwhelmed there.
I've like thought a lot about this, obviously. Kind of like what Rosie was saying, like in order to have her own standing at home and also to be like safe, she has to like smother a lot of like her more sensitive emotions and stuff. Like, because anything that's like perceived as weakness was probably met with like violence or her being like treated like she was lesser. So yeah, I think that's why she struggles to open up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I think showing vulnerability like makes her feel like unsafe in that way.
I think it really shows one of the biggest moments that you can see that is the rooftop scene in episode 6,
Yeah.
where she's crying and she's having this emotional moment, and KJ is like being open to that and in no way is like closing that off or shutting it down, but she feels so uncomfortable with moments like that that she pushes KJ away and she says, you can't tell the others. I don't want them looking at me the way that you're looking at me. The idea that people might pity her or see her as weak is really scary for her.
She has learned from her home that being soft or kind equals weakness, and in the house she was raised in, weakness is dangerous. So she learns that being tough and hiding that supposed weak side of her will keep her from being harmed, but it's still part of her personality. She's a 12 years old girl with so many problems, and that soft side of her still bleeds out sometimes when it's too overwhelming or when she feels safe enough, like when she's around KG sometimes.
Yeah, Tavia, do you want to expand on that a little?
I feel like she is afraid of showing that type of vulnerability, and she's not used to the type of care that KJ gives her or any of the other girls give her. And I feel like she's scared of that. That's why she kind of acts in like mean ways, because it's like a way of like pushing people away, because I feel like in her brain she feels like she doesn't deserve that type of care because she's never gotten it before. Like even from her brother and her dad and Alice and stuff, she's never felt it before. And I feel like it scares her so much because it's like a foreign feeling. She's never it's never happened in her life before. Like she is deep down such a sweet and soft person, but like she just feels like she really has to put on this like tough persona and exterior to protect not only herself but other people around her too.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a lot of the importance of the whole arc with Dylan that we get in the show. We only see a little bit of Dylan in the first episode, but it's a very stark contrast between past Dylan and 2019 Dylan. That's really important, and I think like the junkyard scene, for example, shows a lot of like Dylan unlearning these ideas and Mac being uncomfortable with it. She's like, "Wow, you've become soft." He's saying like, "You can talk to me, whatever," and she just sort of like brushes it off because it's such a weird thing for her to suddenly feel like her brother's this entirely new person who is all of these things that he like looked down upon for so long.
She's so used to him being a certain way. So like I feel like in her brain she couldn't imagine him being how he is in 2019, and seeing it is kind of like shocking to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think also like the whole conversation in like the junkyard scene is like important for like so many reasons, but also I think like along with her just not recognizing this version of him and being like uncomfortable with it, I think also the fact that like he goes out of his way to apologize to her and like say, you know, like that wasn't acceptable, like the way that we grew up, that was not okay. And you can tell that it like shocks her because like, you know, growing up in an environment like that, like it doesn't make her feel good, but like it's normalized. And I don't think she's even like thought about, you know, how not okay it is completely. So I don't know. I think it was like shocking for a lot of reasons.
In that scene too, I think it's important to like realize that in households like that, you never really hear like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like you never hear apologies and stuff like that. So I think her seeing somebody who had so much power and so much what she viewed as like masculinity in that time, I think seeing somebody like that be vulnerable kind of probably helped her learn that she can still be masculine, and be like comfortable with her emotions. I feel like that probably helped her understand that vulnerability wasn't really a bad thing. Or didn't really change who she was.
And I think that sort of segues into the restaurant scene, which I know Rosie was going to talk about, of her like finally accepting that sort of love and affection from Dylan.
Yeah, oh my god. I have so many thoughts about the restaurant scene. I like how it starts off with Mac realizing how things work in this new household and seeing the way Dylan talks to Wilder and child Alice and feeling very alienated by that. And then Wilder makes a comment about a homeless shelter, and it really all seems to go against the original values that she was brought up with. And so I think she feels a sense of betrayal with Dylan being this way now, and so and it's almost like he's not one of them anymore. He's not like her kind of person anymore, and so there's a sense of betrayal and loneliness and isolation. And also what I felt really strongly about in this scene is I think she reacted the way she did and acted out the way she did is because she had this strong feeling like there's a catch when someone's being nice to you, which I know is something that really comes from growing up in a household like that. So I think when Dylan's acting caring towards her and he's acting like this new fatherly figure and he's taking her into this household where things are good, she feels like, what's the catch? What's the catch here? Like, when is it going to go bad? And so when she decides that he's different now, that like that's the catch. So she feels like she's like, oh, I've figured out what's going on here. You're ashamed of me. You're not like me anymore. And so when Dylan takes her aside and they have this discussion and he says, I'm still the old me, Mac, but I'm this me now too. It feels so reassuring. I feel like that was the exact right thing to say. Like, he's not a different person. He's not ashamed of her anymore. He's just expanded who he is to make room for his new self and his old self. And he kind of reassures her with this sense of affection. He says, and I like that he says, when she says, you're not my actual dad, he says, no, but I am their dad and we don't talk to each other like this. And so he's reassuring her that their dynamic is still what it is. They're still siblings, but he also has this new fatherly role that he has to fill. And then he kind of tells her, like, I'm your older brother and I love you. And I think that's such a reassuring thing for her to hear out loud. And then when he hugs her, that's this physical affection that she maybe hasn't got from him before. And I think you can see how her face just softens at the same time. His face kind of softens and she accepts this hug and she has this little smile on her face. And it feels like such a healing moment for both of them, for him as well, I think.
And I think a big part of that, of her like looking and like searching for a catch to all of this, is I think that's easier for her than accepting that affection, no matter what form it's in. It's much easier for her to like find something that he's doing wrong and get mad at him, like, you know, their old dynamic was, than like accept that he's a new person and that he really does care about her. Like, that's scary.
It reminds me of something I read about how our brains aren't designed to keep us happy. They're designed to keep us alive. And so they get really good at pattern recognition. And so in her household, there's been a certain pattern. And so when something doesn't fit that pattern, it's very, very jarring. And so this is outside of the pattern. So it feels dangerous. And it feels like that's why she has to.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to jump back to what Rosie was talking about for when Dylan was talking about, you know, I'm still the old me, but I'm the new me too. He's not only showing Mac that he's changed, but that she can also change too with time, and that she can still work to be more forgiving and kind and access that vulnerability. She can use her old self and this new version that is, you know, to come and make a better version of herself.
You don't know who you're about to become.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about when Dylan tells Mac that he loves her. She has this sort of like change in her face, like sort of like this surprised look, because I highly doubt she's ever heard it before, not from him or anybody. I don't think she's ever heard it from anyone at all. And I think again that it's extremely shocking to her because she knows him like this certain way because of the fact that they grew up in this household together. And I think that it's kind of difficult for her to imagine him a different way, even though he's there, he's in her face and he's saying things that she's never heard before. And I think like it's hard for her to take it in, and it's just like really, really hard to watch because like you can see the realization on her face that he's serious, that like he actually like loves her, as he should, because that's her older brother.
Bouncing off of what Tavia was talking about how, you know, in the I love you scene, it's Max physically or mentally uncomfortable, but she's also very physically uncomfortable. We see it a lot. She doesn't really reciprocate hugs and she doesn't like physical touch. She's not used to that kind of stuff. So not only is she hearing the words I love you for the first time, that's the first time that her brother has probably ever hugged her. He's most certainly shoved her, but he has not hugged her. I just wanted to add that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that like this I'm your older brother and I love you thing, like I think it's important that Dylan opens up and shows vulnerability to her because they grew up in the same house and they both had to be tough. So it kind of shows her that it's okay to feel things and show affection to people you love, that you can do that and still be happy or not get hurt because of it, which is Max's greatest fear.
I think it's interesting because both of them are older siblings and they've dealt with different types of like relationships when it comes to like siblings. I mean, I know Mac is the younger sibling, never mind, but like they kind of switch roles though. They switch roles, and I think it's kind of important because I think after those conversations with Dylan, she really realized that it's okay to care about people and that it actually helps other people, no matter how like she feels about it inside, whether it's like she feels that she shouldn't be vulnerable, but she knows that it can help somebody. Like she really, with no questions asked, like she was like, you know, she helped Aaron, and she was really like, even at the party at the Brandeman house, she just really wanted to help her and be there for her, because I know that she like definitely needed that when she was young. She wanted to be that person for Aaron.
That also ties back into what Dylan said about how you don't know who you're about to become. Like with Erin, she can become this kind of insightful and perceptive protector type person who is something that I think is really natural to her. And so it allows her to explore other ways of being and also develop this really sweet bond with Erin.
Yeah, she spends so much time like with all of her walls up, so we don't really get to see like as much of her being like sensitive and sweet with the other girls. But I think it's interesting how like she has these moments where she uses like words specifically to like comfort the other girls. Like the conversation that she has with Erin, like in the coat room scene, just kind of saying like you saved our lives. Like, that was very sweet. And also like how she was kind of reassuring like Tiff about her future self. I don't know. I just think it's interesting that like she kind of resorts to like using words to comfort people. I guess.
She uses jokes to comfort people. I know similarly another scene with Erin is outside the video store. In both of those instances, and even before they go into the coat room, she's trying to make jokes to diffuse the tension, because that's one way that she can make somebody feel better without making herself uncomfortable, which I think was really interesting. That was something that I sort of zoned in on immediately, even within my first watch of the show.
I think Mac realizes Erin's kindness and sensible personality in general, and she starts feeling more secure about getting close to her, and starting more and more to realize that she's not gonna get hurt just for having fun with her friend and showing affection in her own way.
Mm-hmm. Lee, did you want to say?
Yeah. So you mentioned like the conversation outside of the tech store. And in that conversation, like, Max seems more uncomfortable with what she's saying than when she talks to Erin again later when they're in the coat room. Like, she's definitely not wanting to, like, open up at all, and she's like, oh, well, I'm sorry I shot you, it won't happen again. And then, like, in contrast, when she has the moment with Erin where she's like, well, you saved all of us. Like, it feels a lot, like, more emotional later because she's like developed more as a character and knows that she can be vulnerable with Erin.
Yeah, definitely. She is more uncomfortable outside the tech store than she is in the coat room. And I see a similar thing with, she's a lot more uncomfortable on the rooftop than she is, for example, in the barn, where she shares her feelings and she's like very vocally. It's like really interesting, and it's a really huge growth moment for her character. Ignoring the part where KJ like takes her hand away.
I was just about to bring up KJ.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was when like vulnerability and KJ and Matt come to mind. Yeah, the bike scene comes to my mind and the barn scene comes to my mind. But we haven't yet touched on the I think you're worth the shit scene, and that's forever seared in my brain, so I'm gonna talk about it. That moment, specifically for Mac, you can almost see her like stop breathing for a little bit. And I think that's the moment of the season when her walls come completely down, because the episode before, the rooftop scene, the walls are still kind of there. She may have admitted that she has cancer or whatever, but right then and there, that's when they were truly vulnerable with each other, and that was a season-long arc for her. And I think it was just really important that she entrusted KJ with this information and decided to leave all the preconceived notions that she had, at the door. She took Dylan's words to heart in that moment, I think.
Okay, so since we were talking about like I think you're worth a shit, like that scene, I wanted to kind of like talk about like maybe why Mac feels like comfortable. Well, not comfortable because it's like a struggle for her, but like she feels drawn to KJ, and she's still able to like share these things with her and have these moments with her. And I think a large part of it is that KJ like is open with her and protects her and fights for her in a way that I don't think anybody in her life has done up to that point, if we're like excluding the little like storyline with Dylan. And I also think that KJ like pushes her and challenges her to think differently, and she can like match her energy in a way that I don't think any of the other girls can. So I think that, I don't know, it's a very nice, sweet little dynamic that they have. And I don't know, I think it just kind of adds to everything, I guess. I don't know.
Something I think is really interesting, and we can sort of circle back to how her whole household functions, is the picnic table scene, where they start out and they have this little joking moment and stuff, but eventually Max sort of goes on the offense, and she's like talking about the factory and her dad's job, and she says not great stuff, and KJ sort of stands up against that in a way that I think is really important. And then they obviously they have like a disagreement over that. And I think it's a really interesting scene.
I think that like her being called out for saying like those types of things. I think she's really used to kind of hearing it around her household. I feel like nobody, like Dylan definitely doesn't hold back with saying that stuff, and same with her dad and probably her friends she has from school. Like, but being called out for it, I think she understands, and she does have an open mind to a point, but like actually she doesn't. But she does understand where people come from, especially when KJ talks about her own personal experience with being bullied for being Jewish. And I think that's because her face kind of drops a little bit, and she says that I would never do anything like that. And I think that it really kind of affected her, but she wanted to make it clear to KJ and to herself that she would never act that way or never would do that.
I think it's definitely a matter of like, that's something she never really questions. It's just something that she grew up around. And she definitely dislikes KJ on principle because she has so much privilege over Mac. And so when KJ like criticizes her behavior, her first instinct is like, well, what do you know? Like, who the fuck are you to tell me that I'm wrong about this? They're not coming for your dad's job. And I think that second part of KJ really calling her out, and mixed with Dylan admitting that a lot of the things they grew up with are wrong, is probably a really big thing for her. Because I don't think generally
Definitely opens her eyes.
Yeah, having somebody like KJ generally wouldn't be something that wouldn't be somebody that she would listen to if they were telling her that she was wrong about something.
Like I think that again, her sharing her own experience, I feel like it did kind of open her eyes because Mac doesn't want to hurt people. She's very defensive and very like just defensive like with stuff and is mean, but like even in the end of episode 8 she apologized. She said she was sorry for everything. I think that a lot of that she does feel bad for, and she tries to make up for it a lot of the time, and it's just something that's it's just kind of like beaten into her brain that she has to act this certain way and be this certain thing, and I think she does try to fight against it a lot of the time.
I think it's really interesting in that scene how KJ, I like how she sets boundaries and she says, that's not okay. But also she still keeps kind of expecting better of Mac, and she keeps having faith in Mac, I think, and she stays engaged with her, and she still keeps their dynamic open. And I like that. I like that she is willing to set boundaries, but still keep trying with Mac and still allow Mac to have this kind of emotional access to her. Because I know naturally, like the instinct when someone treats you that way is to just shut them off and cut off ties and cut off that gateway of communication. But KJ doesn't do that, and I think it speaks a lot to how much faith she has in people, and especially how much faith she has in Mac, that she's willing to set boundaries and steer her in the right direction, but still be there for her and be with her. And so, yeah. And I think Mac needs someone like that. So
I think
very interesting.
Yeah. I think along with that makes me think of the end of episode 2, when Mac sort of storms out. She feels very much, in that moment, she feels very alienated. They're talking about the Debbie Gibson concert, which is just something that she, doesn't get. Then Tiff makes this little comment of like, oh, Mac's brother, he's probably the one in jail. And so once again, she feels like she's being looked down upon. And so she goes on the offensive in that moment and leaves because she's like, you people don't care about me. Like, I'm going to find my brother. He's not going to look down on me. He's going to be there for me, which is a sad moment. And then we have that whole reconciliation between them in the restaurant scene. And then suddenly she has to leave again. And that's like a really awful place to leave all that.
I think she like meeting Dylan and seeing who he's become. I feel like she could see that she could finally be in a place, in a household that treats her like she's a human being and not some abnormal person who is weak or anything like that. And having to leave that, I feel like that's super overwhelming and emotional, and she really does take it hard. Like even on the motorcycle, I think she just kind of lets herself feel everything that she has been feeling, not even just because of that, just everything.
I think she very much feels like, I think in her family, there's a sense that you need to like prove yourself to be given respect. But then we have like KJ, for example, who just treats her like a person, and it doesn't really matter what she does. She's just like deserving of kindness and respect, which I think is really amazing.
she really does let herself. It takes a while, and she sometimes goes back on it, but she does let herself, especially be vulnerable and show her emotions and her true self to KJ. Because I think she knows deep down that she's not going to be judged, and that she's allowed to talk about her feelings and things going on. Even when they were sitting on the steps and stuff, she was really expressing how she was feeling and stuff like that. And I think that she really does feel that she can do it with her.
Yeah, because a lot of the bigotry that is perpetuated in her family is very much like an us versus them thing. And so very much when she feels like criticized by people outside of that, that is a really, easy way to get defensive. I feel like
yes, that's the segue into a lot of stuff I wanted to say. Can I go into that?
Yeah.
Cool. So, related to that us versus them mentality that she picked up from her dad, I feel like knowing a bit about her background, like that us versus them mentality is very common in the kind of blue collar Irish Catholic family that she comes from, and I think a lot of it develops because it's a way to keep going through poverty, and it's a way to, when you go out to work every day, you go to work in the mines or something like that. If you say to yourself, I'm doing this for us, like this is for us, this is for my family, this is for us, it keeps you going, and it keeps you going in a way that not a lot of other mentalities do. But then, and so Mac really, I think, adopts that in a way as a way to align herself with her family. But that mentality can also lead to this kind of bigotry that we see, and they're taking our jobs. Like that's a big pain point for those types of families, the job thing. And so she says a lot of these things, and it really kind of develops into something pretty toxic. And with the J slur, like they're taking our jobs, and so it becomes this way that she treats others with, and like I think all of that originally stems from this kind of us versus them mentality, and it's us against the world. So that's
I think
those are my thoughts about that.
With that mentality, if things aren't going your way, it's easy to just like immediately search for like a scapegoat. And I think with all the bigotry and all those awful sentiments going around, that's an easy thing to immediately go to and immediately blame those people. Okay.
Yeah, and it's even a way to connect with her family. Like if she defines her family as the us, that's a bond. It's it's a not in many ways not a healthy bond, but it's still a bond, and it's a way that she can have that bond. So
I feel like we should go into, we didn't put this in the outline at all, but I feel like we need to talk about the whole cancer thing in general.
Oh, definitely.
That thing?
I feel like that was sort of neglected.
Sorry, I had to get a laugh in there. Okay.
I think knowing and being told that she was gonna die really made her dive into herself more, and realize that she wants to live. I feel like she's never really thought about it, and is kind of stuck in this one place, and wants to be different. Now knowing that this is gonna happen, she wants to be different. She wants to act different. She wants to be who she really is, because she knows that she'll regret it when she eventually dies. And I think it's really kind of eye-opening knowing this information. And it's obviously shocking and stuff like that. And I feel like she really doesn't know how to feel about it, but is obviously, I think there's some anger as well within it, knowing that that's going to happen and stuff like that.
Can I jump off of that?
Yeah.
And just jumping off of what Tavia said, you have to put this in context that she's 12 years old. If I got that kind of information at 12 years old, if I knew I had 4 years to live, I don't know what I would do with myself. Like, that's a lot of information to process. You don't have a lot of you have a lot of things on your bucket list, I'm sure, that you can't really accomplish. And she feels like she's kind of trapped in herself, and having only 4 years to completely change who you are and do it all at 12 years old, that's like, so you can't really put that kind of pressure. Yeah, you can't put that kind of pressure on yourself, especially that young. And in that moment, there's just so many emotions running through her head. How is she going to be able to accomplish everything she ever wants to do? How can she change? How can she live her life authentically? It's like, I can't even imagine how much pain is rushing through her body at that moment.
And I think there's a sense of helplessness there outside of just like knowing you're gonna die, of like being a child, going to like the rooftop scene where she talks about like, I used to tell myself to suck it up and stick it out because it'd all be better when I was older. But sort of realizing that she's never going to be able to do all these things that she wants to because she is just a kid, and she's never going to be able to be her own and independent person, is really especially heartbreaking.
I was just kind of learning that she's going to die that young. I think it kind of just like not reaffirms to her, but kind of like tells her that like, oh, I'm not actually getting out of here. I'm not actually going to make anything of myself. Like, this is as good as it gets, how it is right now, which is terrible, which is really sad. And also, I think it's interesting that like when they're in like the mall scene and she kind of like is like, oh, well, guess what? My brother's a doctor. I guess we're not all like future Coyles aren't dog shit after all. And it's like, I feel like her like learning that that is her fate is kind of being like, oh, well, I guess Dylan turns out okay, but I don't. So maybe that's just how it is. And I think that that's really fucking sad. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it leads into a question that we had, and I usually save questions to the end, but but when they're applicable, I'll put them in the middle. But somebody said, my only question is, if Mac found the cure for cancer, would she still take it if there was a risk that Dylan's future could be changed? And just the idea of like feeling that responsibility of like, oh, Dylan was able to change his life because of me, like this awful thing that happened to him. I'm in the ground, but he got the brass ring, is what she says on the roof. And almost feeling like guilt of wanting to change that outcome, because maybe without that rude awakening, Dylan might become just like their dad, just like the person that he hates so much. I don't know. Really tragic.
I think I actually have an opinion on this. Surprisingly. I think she would take it. Even though there is a risk, I think that she knows that deep down, Dylan is a good person, and even if in a scenario where Mac doesn't die, doesn't get cancer, Dylan may not be a doctor, but he could be something else and still find, himself and find the good parts of the 99 version that we saw, or the 2019 version that we saw. And even if that takes a little bit of struggle, in this scenario, Mac could lead him through that. And it'd be kind of a flipped situation where Mac is the one teaching Dylan.
Yeah.
At least that's how I feel.
Finally reaching out. Go, Jo.
Oh, I was just kind of going to say that I like agree with Shelby. Like, I think she would still take it because like she's seen Dylan in 2019. And, obviously if she was cured, he would probably end up different. But she does know that there's a possibility for Dylan to be a better person and to be the big brother that she needs. So I feel like she would still take it because she would know that like that is a possibility. So yeah.
I feel like this might be a good time to talk about Alice too.
So with Alice, I think it's so fascinating how she's the only other female in their household, and I think that puts her in a funny position in relation to Mac, because I feel like there is a bit of a hierarchy there, with the masculine traits being kind of bolstered, and feminine traits of softness being pushed down. And I think Alice kind of represents weakness to some extent, because she's an alcoholic and she sleeps on the couch all day, and she's in this marriage with Mac's father, who it probably isn't great to her and stuff like that. And I think she also kind of creates Mac's expectations of femininity and what femininity is. And so I think Mac really doesn't want to be like Alice. But at the same time, Alice is who she models her expectations for her future off of. When she's talking to Erin, I think it was, and how she thinks she's going to grow up to have an alcoholic husband and live the same sort of life as Alice does. And so I think that all these circumstances put Mac ostensibly at odds with Alice, and she has to kind of distance herself from Alice to maintain her own status in this household. Because I read the comics after I watched the show, and so it was so interesting to me when I read the scene in the comics where at first she's acting at odds with Alice. She says some kind of bratty 12-year-old thing like, "You're not my mom," or something like that. But then when Alice has the gun and she's going to do whatever she's going to do, I don't remember what her reason was. It was something related to hell, I think. but Mac just breaks down immediately, and you can see the emotion on her face, and she calls Alice mom, and we see that she really does love Alice very deeply, in the comics at least, and so they have this kind of fake at odds dynamic, but really deep down there's a lot of love there, and she does think of Alice as her mom. And then it's just gonna go to Charles. Just a sec. And so in the show, when Dylan tells Mac that Alice was the one who took care of her and never left her side, and we see the surprise on her face, I think that's kind of an interesting contrast to the comics, and I don't fully understand that, but and she speaks to Dylan, she says, how's dad, is he still with Alice? And there's kind of so much affection in her voice when she asks him that. It doesn't sound like she has anything against either of them. But then also in when they're in 1999, I think it is, when she runs from Alice in the cemetery, I really think that shows the stifling of her softer, more feminine traits. And I think that if she had allowed herself to develop that softness and that emotionality earlier, and allowed herself to develop her EQ earlier, she might have handled that differently, and she might not have, I would have liked to see her not run from Alice, and for her to speak to her and give them both a sense of closure, and like embrace that softer side of herself, but also embrace this main female influential figure in her life. And so I think it shows, it's very sad, and it shows the impact of her kind of stunted emotional development. And so, yeah, this dynamic between Alice and Mac, it leaves me wishing for more, and it leaves me with a sense of kind of regret and wistfulness, because we see a lot of what it's hinted at what their bond could have been, and then it's showed kind of explicitly in the comics. But I think when Dylan said to Mac, like, you don't know who you're about to become, it at least alludes to a different Mac's different way of being, and also possibly a closer bond with Alice, and not even closer because they are close, but a more open and more willingly soft bond with Alice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would love to see that if the show gets continued.
Mm-hmm. Disagree with me if you want, but I think maybe we should stop here because we're all getting really emotional, and we will get into a lot more during the individual episode and scene breakdowns. But you can.
Jo has something to add.
Jo, add it.
So I guess I kind of just wanted to, like, when talking about like Mac and a huge part of her arc being about like vulnerability and like growing into being like a more open, generally like better person, I wanted to kind of mention how like I think it's really like interesting and cool that Mac can have an arc about that and still kind of be who she is at the end of the day. Like, I guess when it comes to like characters like Mac that come from like rough backgrounds and like female characters, and they're like more masculine or like gender nonconforming, usually a part of like embracing the vulnerability comes with like embracing femininity as well, more so on like an outside appearance. And I don't know, I just think it's really cool that like Mac can grow and change into a better person and have like an entire arc about vulnerability without having to like sacrifice her masculinity or like what makes her who she is. I think that is what makes her very unique in kind of like stories about this. And yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to add that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something I wanted to talk about was episode 6, where obviously like Mac is quite supportive of Erin and what she's doing and what she's going through, and is trying not to like add her own stuff on top of that. And eventually it blows up into sort of like, instead of just not piling her own shit on top of Erin's, she gets frustrated with what Erin's telling her and like acting like Mac can't understand what she's going through, makes her really upset. But with that whole thing, I want to talk about the fake little story that she makes about the vets, because that's clearly not something she pulled out of her ass. I don't think like her main goal in life isn't just getting out. She has more hopes for herself than just that. So I think Rosie had a lot to say about that and the whole thing with the animals and other stuff.
Yes, I think the scene where she told Erin that she wanted to be a vet was so beautiful to me, and I feel like it says a lot about that and her love of animals says a lot about a really gentle and sweet side. And I also kind of think this is more of a headcanon, but I feel like the vet thing is a little bit connected to Dylan being a doctor. I think there's a talent for healing in that family, like a family that's been through so much harm also has this great capacity for healing, which I love. And her love of animals with the vet thing she says to Erin, and also the way she goes to see the goat in the barn, and like that's where she goes for refuge. She goes to see the goat and spend time with the goat. I think that's so beautiful, and I love that we get to see this softer, sweeter side of her. And I think in connection with her love of animals and healing is also her love of books, which I think is also a more sensitive trait that she kind of stifles down. And in the comics, we see that she's a library kid and she loves books and she goes to the library and she borrows books above her age level. And just for me as a former library kid and as a former book nerd, I relate to that so much. And I really feel like libraries for her are a refuge, and books for troubled kids are there for escapism and imagination, and they allow her to nurture her imagination. And so each individual book is a way for her to escape into another world, but it's also the library itself is somewhere that she's safe and somewhere that she's allowed to show her softer and more sensitive side. And so that's kind of a home away from home for her, I think. And so that and the animals thing just shows how in her life, in her own way, she does seek out and find that refuge and that safety in that area where she can nurture her sensitivity. So yeah.
I think I am going to cut off just like the main discussion now, because we could definitely get into more of the specific stuff. There's like a bajillion things I want to bring up right now, but I'm going to force myself not to because we can get into those during the episode breakdowns. Question for Rosie specifically, because you were sort of talking about this the most, is which animal and literature genre do you think is her favorite?
Oh my god. Which animal is her favorite? Well, I have a headcanon of Mac being a horse girl. I was a bit of a horse girl.
Very
but
based in fact too, a little bit too,
Yeah, I think horses have this really calming energy and they have this old soul quality. And so I think that she would love horses because of this old soul quality. And probably also dogs, because I think she would like that dogs are always really happy to see you. I think she would love that. She would just let herself be able to play around with the dog. And even the way she's jumping around with Dylan in that scene where they're doing the fireworks and stuff is very like high energy. It's very like dog it's very dog energy. And then what book genre? I think she would kind of like I think she would like sci-fi and fantasy, but that's because I like sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think she would like comedy, which also I love comedy, and she has a strong sense of humor, so I think she would love comedy. And also this is probably more of a headcanon, but I think she would have kind of a silly teen phase where she just allows herself to read all the silly romance and dreamy teen I think that's even the book that she was borrowing in the comic. It looked like some kind of silly teen thing, so I think she would kind of allow herself to indulge that, and because she doesn't have that kind of many outlets for softness in her life, so I think she would enjoy that too.
And I think there's a big sort of belief and headcanon within the whole Paper Girls community of as she grows older and starts to reject her family a little bit more and accept her queerness, that she would be into some more revolutionary ideas of queer theory and all that jazz, and some more sapphic romance. I think would be really cool and great.
Yeah. And also turtles, with her turtle necklace, and turtles represent immortality and life and stuff like that, and turtles are beautiful. And also I kind of feel like she'd have a bit of a love-hate relationship with birds. She'd see a bird on the street and be like, what's up? Hello, bird.
I'm editing this out, but I'm actually so terrified of birds. That's a fun Nora fact.
Oh
I'm actually
my god,
so
I
scared
should be
of birds.
What?
terrified.
I
Nora,
have
please.
birds. I have
It's
birds.
because my brother, when I was like 4, told me about red-winged blackbirds who like if you get too close to them, they could like peck your skull in. And I live near red-winged blackbirds, so whenever there's red-winged blackbirds like in my town, I've been dive bombed by one before, and so whenever I hear a bird like chirping, I'm like, oh my god, what? You're out to get me.
Where is it?
Nora, do you
Oh,
think the
Jesus.
birds work for the bourgeoisie?
I do actually.
Shelby, are you stuck in 2019?
I should be scared of birds from the amount of times I've
Please.
been attacked by them. I was pecked by a peacock in the thigh when I was really little, and it left a gash.
I'm sorry.
I had to
But
unmute for that, a peacock.
I was trying to grab its tail, like I think it was dessert.
Average Australian Tuesday.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Okay,
Oh, and
guys.
seagulls. Oh my
Let's
god.
get
So
back.
on seagulls.
Let's get back a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
I was like looking for things. So this is from Michael C. Gross. Do you think the show would have followed the comic plot wherein Mac's sickness is caused by time travel and is thus incurable, or would it have given a less gut-wrenching resolution to that storyline? Because we know that the show is
I have a
definitely
head
going against
Everybody
the comics.
unmuted.
Oh my god.
Okay. You guys figured that out.
Can I
I'm
go
going to
first?
headcanon. Oh yeah,
Joe-
yeah. You go. You go.
Joe, go first.
Okay.
Or-
Selfishly, I want to think that they don't change it because it's heartbreaking as it is. That part of the comics really, I don't know. I really love that portion of the comics. Maybe there's some way that they can cure. I don't know, but I think it being caused by time travel makes sense. I don't know why they would change that portion of it.
Mhm.
But
I would-
in my mind, it doesn't change.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that part to change. But I would obviously like a happier ending. Does anybody else go?
Shall I launch into my whole headcanon?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that they would leave that it's caused by time travel, but I also think, or maybe I'm just convincing myself, that in this iteration of the timeline, they would find a way to cure it. And I love seeing theories about Dylan already had the vial of her blood, and I kind of like to think that because they're going to see future Tiff, and because she's invented time travel in this timeline, that she would want to get involved too, and they would go on this super time traveler race to Sol 40C and stuff like this. So yeah, I think I'm adamant that they're going to find a way to cure time travel cancer.
Okay, I can go into a different question if we want. The next ones are a little less. I'm gonna get progressively more silly as we go towards the end. One is theories about her biological mother, because we know Alice is her stepmother specifically.
Oh, I have a headcanon, not a theory, but the headcanon.
Mhm.
Shall I say it?
Yeah.
I had a theory the other day that maybe she her mother was involved in time travel too, and so they think she just abandoned them, but actually she went into the future to try and save Mac, and she got lost and then died. And then
That's cute.
What?
Well,
Damn.
not completely cute, but
I don't feel like that's what actually happened, but
no, it's a fun thought for sure.
yeah, it's a fun little headcanon.
Definitely.
Yes.
What do you think future Mac's style would have evolved to if she were in 99 or 2019?
Should I say it?
Say it.
Yes.
Okay. So I forget his name, but the guy from Breaking Bad, not the old dude, the younger one. What is his name?
You
Jesse?
mean Jesse?
Yes.
Jesse.
Yes. That is how Mac would dress in
Okay.
99 in my head.
I kind of agree. I agree.
Like the huge baggy clothes and
Yeah.
the t-shirt.
Mac is me confirmed. I wear a bunch of
I
baggy
agree.
clothes. I was gonna say that. I think she wears extremely baggy things. Even in 2019, I could still see that.
Okay.
I feel like Mac is tied to one style her entire life.
Yeah, definitely masculine, baggy clothes.
Yes,
baggy
she is
grunge.
me. She is me.
Baggy grunge look? I think
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a headcanon about her being very granola, the granola aesthetic, van life,
Oh my
because she looked a bit granola in her 10-year-old self or whatever it was in the comics. And then also, I just had this idea of like, what if she tried to dress like what's he called, Danny from Grease for a while, with the like slicked back chopped back hair and the like the jeans and the like leather. I think that would be so funny. I think she would realize that that was a horrible look on her, but I think it would be hilarious if she did it for a while.
There was something I noticed. I think Mac took a lot of young Mac took a lot of inspiration for her look. Terminator. There's a character, I can't remember his name. There's a character that has the exact haircut, the exact style, and I think it's like the first one from the 80s. Can't remember his name, but I think that she definitely saw that movie and was like, you know what, I'm gonna cut my hair exactly like that, and just decided to do it.
That's great. I think we can end with just going around and just saying your favorite Mac scene. So, favorite Mac scenes, go.
The tampon scene, because when she was like, I think that's the size of your vagina. It just so loud.
Okay,
and she
Tavia?
really just like, it's so funny. I'm sorry.
I'd probably be a super.
I'm gonna go silly too. The scene where she's climbing the stairs.
Yeah, she climbs
Sorry,
the
okay.
stairs on all
But
fours.
serious, to be serious. Yes, yes. But to be serious, the junkyard scene.
That one's definitely a sweet one.
My favorite silly scene of her, and it's because it was what I was thinking, and someone had to say it, when they're walking down the street and it's after Erin's just gone off fully at her adult self, and Mac is like, "You could have been a crack whore," like it's like, and they were all like, "Mac, like not right now." I was like, someone had to say that. So I loved that.
My favorite Mac scene is definitely the the scene where she's sitting in the office with the social worker. I think it's the perfect mix of like funny and like jarringly sad.
Like for a serious scene, I really like when she's in the car with Dylan and they're talking about like when she was sick. I just like the transition from them talking about that and then just like listening to music, and when she is like trying to put the cassette in the car and she's like, what kind of cheap car doesn't have a tape deck? I love that scene. But I also want to shout out the scene where she grabs KJ in the woods and she's like, it's okay, when she loses the hockey stick. I think about that too often.
Oh my god, I love that part. That's like my favorite scene.
Is that your favorite
that's the one. I choose that one.
Okay.
I choose that one.
That's Easy's favorite scene. We'll end on a strong note with Jo.
Oh God. Okay. It's kind of hard, like, because I have like two. I have a couple, but I think like it's between like two of these for me. The rooftop scene with KJ is definitely one of them, because I think that for me that was the moment when I was watching the show where I was like, this is Mac. Like this is the comic character being brought to life. Like that for me was when I was like, oh, okay, like that's her. Like that's my kid. Okay. And then also the scene with Dylan in the car when he says, you don't know who you're about to become, because that's my favorite line in the whole show. And I think it's like a really beautiful line. And I think that it's kind of like a shout out to people who've like read the comics in a way, because like, I think it's fair to say that by the end, she's the girl that changes the most. I think like on the surface, at least. So I don't know. Those are definitely my two, because they're very meaningful to me, I guess.
Yeah, I love her scenes with Dylan, and I love her scenes on the rooftop and on the motorbike as well. But one of the things that makes those scenes among my favorites is Sophia's acting. Like every time she does one of those scenes, she shows something new on her face. I'm like, wow, this is a new level of emotional experience. Like it's so nuanced, and yes.
I think just it speaks volumes to the fact that Sophia is able to play a character like Max so well, even though they're so different.
She's so talented. Like she really is.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna get more into that when we talk about like specific scenes and stuff.
I wanted to say something really quick about Sophia and like her. It's just like a really little quick thing, but in like her goodbye post, she said something about how like Mac represents the possibility of change, and I thought that was like so perfect and beautiful, and just kind of shows like how well she understands Mac as a character. And I don't know, I just thought that was like perfect. I just wanted to mention that.
All right, thank you so much for listening. Next week's episode will be all about KJ.
It is already recorded. If you want to see our episode recording and posting schedule, you can look in our link tree. It is linked in our Twitter at Stony Streams. If you have any questions, you can email us at stonystreamspod@gmail.com. Make sure that anytime you tweet about the podcast, either tag us or use one of our hashtags, Ask Stony Streams or the Stony Streams podcast hashtag. We love seeing all your tweets. We're actually on Instagram and TikTok now as well. They are both also at Stony Streams, and we'll start posting there shortly.